that 10-7 score was the 7th highest scoring game in that building this year. There were 6 Cubs games that were higher scoring than Iowa and Northwestern's 10-7.
All right, welcome back to episode 7. Is it 7?
I don't know.
Nobody knows. Nobody's counting.
Flying by.
It's flying by. College football season's flying by. Welcome back to the Man in Black podcast. Todd Blackledge. It's good to have you here with me, Josh Mancuso. And we had a good slate of games this past weekend. So real quick before we get into, we've got 4 on our list here. Real quick, where were you this past weekend?
I was at Michigan. I was in Ann Arbor for Michigan and Purdue. It was a rematch of the Big Ten championship game last year. Wasn't much of a matchup this year, although Purdue's defense did play pretty good for a couple quarters. It wasn't as much of a blowout as some of Michigan's other games have been, but they ended up winning 41-13. Purdue scored a touchdown very late in the game to make it 13, and that's the first time anybody has scored more than 10 points against Michigan's defense this year. That's
unbelievable. That's a crazy stat. I mean, that's the best defense in the country right there. I don't know how you deal with that. Well, I'm wearing my Oklahoma today. I'm headed out to Oklahoma City for a comedy show this week, and we'll be attending the Oklahoma versus West Virginia game. So wanted to show some love to my Boomer Sooners out there today on the podcast. Even though they had a rough game last week, which we'll get to that in a minute. But first, I cannot get over this Kansas State versus Texas game, Todd. Okay, 33-30, Texas wins in a really close game. Chris Kleiman, coach for Kansas State, goes for it there in overtime instead of just kicking the field goal to tie it. All right, so the kicker, Chris Tennant, he missed 2 field goals earlier in the game, but he just made a 45-yarder minutes earlier to tie it. What was going on, and why not kick the field goal and tie it? He just went for it. What do you think about that? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, so I can see both sides of that. Okay, first of all, you're the road team, right? Maybe you feel like you've got momentum at that moment, and your quarterback, Will Howard, has played a great football game. He's thrown for 320 some yards, right? They were down, they were down big. I mean, they went on a 20-0 run in the second half to get back into the game. And I think, he probably just felt, hey, let's just try to win this thing right now. I don't think it was a lack of confidence in his kicker. I think it was more a feeling like, we've got momentum. Let's try to win this thing on the road right now. And it just didn't work, and had it worked, everybody would have thought it was great. It's similar to, Brian Kelly last year going for the win against Alabama. At that point, he felt like, let's do it right now. Let's go for the win. But it didn't work out.
Well, as a fan just watching the game, I was excited that they were going for it. I was like, this is awesome. Like, this is why I watch college football, was not to see a kick made to tie the game. Let's see somebody, with some guts and go for it. I think we have a clip of that last player here. Let's play it real quick.
Empty backfield. Howard looking. Howard scrambles. Howard lets it go. Incomplete. And Texas survives.
Howard lets it go. I love what a call, man. That's what college football is about. Moments like that. That was so exciting.
Well, and especially with Oklahoma losing on the same day, Texas, they needed that win, right? It's to keep their dreams alive. Malik Murphy, played for the second game in a row and replacing Quinn Ewers, and he had some good plays, he had some bad plays, and right now I think the good news for Texas is that Quinn Ewers, according to Steve Sarkisian, is day to day. He's throwing. He may be able to play this week or the next couple of weeks. And for them to go all the way and win the Big 12 championship and have a chance to get in the playoffs, they need Quinn Ewers back. I mean, it's a really good football team, but they're not the same without Quinn Ewers.
For sure. It is great to see them be able to still plug and play and keep going even without him. But for sure, if they're going to make a run at this thing, they're going to have Quinn back. Another big game was Washington versus USC. Washington at USC there in the Coliseum. And Washington comes out victorious once again. They keep winning. USC keeps losing 3 games in a row. And there's all over social media these clips of Caleb Williams crying and stuff, and there's all kinds of commentary around it. I think we've got some clips of Williams.
Did all he could. Just came up a bit short. Did all he could. Just came up a bit short.
People like, dude, you got to man up. Like, you got to, and I'm like, honestly, I watched that and I'm like, I feel so sorry for this kid. He's given his all. He left Oklahoma where he originally went, followed Lincoln Riley to USC, wins the Heisman last year, expectations all over him. He's 22 years old or whatever, however old he is, just a kid. Now they've lost 3 straight games. It's tough, man. You can see what a tough moment for him. So anyways, that touched my heart. I definitely am not one to be like, you need to man up, man. Football is a rough sport. It's a lot of emotion goes into it. And, I'm happy to see him embracing his family and just, working through it.
Yeah. I mean, a couple things on that. I mean, first of all, I give him a lot of credit for playing as hard and as well as he did, because a lot of people maybe speculated once they were kind of out of the college football playoff picture and maybe out of the Pac-12 championship picture, he might just pack it on in, just start thinking and preparing himself mentally and physically for the NFL draft. But he didn't. He went out there and did everything he could, had a great game, played his heart out. So I really give him a lot of credit for that. As far as the showing of the emotion, I mean, that's a real side of him. I guess the only thing I would have, I just thought it was odd that he would jump up in the stands and do that when he knew everybody was going to pick that up on camera, and to me, it's like, see your mom when you come out of the dressing room in the dark, out of the tunnel before you're going to the bus, or going home. I don't know. I mean, I'm not dissing him for showing emotion. I'm not dissing him for being upset. It just, I have mixed feelings on that particular scene.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Here's, who else was crying after that game is Alex Grinch. I mean, the defensive coordinator got fired for USC. They gave up 52 points, 572 yards. The last 4 or 5 games, they've averaged giving up over 40 points a game. And I like Alex Grinch. And, my dad was a coach. I hate seeing coaches get fired. He's a good coach, but he just has not been able to get it together with Lincoln Riley's offense, either at Oklahoma or at USC. And I'll say this, it's not the easiest thing in the world to be a defensive coordinator on an offensive team that is that explosive and plays that style. It's hard to practice against certain types of offenses because you're used to seeing this in practice, which is, run and gun and high flying and all that. So it's not easy. And the guy who's done the best job of that, I think, is Jim Knowles, who went from Oklahoma State. First of all, he did a great job building a great defense at Oklahoma State, even though they were really good on offense and explosive on offense. And he's doing the same thing at Ohio State in his second year as a defensive coordinator there. And when we talked to him a couple of weeks ago, he said, look, first of all, you got to convince your players, hey, don't just concede that you're going to get beat by our offense. When we're in practice, you compete. You go out and try to win. I don't care if it's Marvin Harrison or Emeka Ibuka. You go out and try to compete and win. And then you have to believe as a unit that we can help and win games with our defense. And I think Ohio State is proving that this year. The most consistent thing about Ohio State's team this year has been their defense.
Yeah, they didn't have, they had a little meeting there with Rutgers. Rutgers seemed to be in it there for a while. I thought about picking Rutgers as an upset, and I was like, what am I doing? No way. Ohio State's
They played good. Rutgers played really good. Really good.
They did. They hung in there, and good for them.
That interception, it was a 93-yard interception return. First drive of the third quarter, Rutgers was driving down. They were winning 9-7, and ball got topped up in the air, and they returned at 93 yards. That turned the game around right there.
Yeah, it was a crazy hit on the receiver, and I think the DB was hurt on that one.
Yeah, Josh Proctor, yeah.
Yeah, man, great game there. Well, okay, good deal. Well, obviously the other big game over the weekend, here we go, the Sooners and the Cowboys of Oklahoma State, Bedlam. Boy, Oklahoma State making a statement here. You going to leave us to go to the SEC?
Yeah.
And, forget this Bedlam forever. We're gonna make sure you go out with a loss. So
yeah,
Congrats to them.
Yeah, I mean, and not only that, I mean, what a sweet victory for all Oklahoma State fans, and especially head coach Mike Gundy, who played at Oklahoma State. He's been there a long time. That was his 100th career win at Oklahoma State in that game, and now they've got bragging rights for however many years it is till they play again. I mean, who knows if they'll ever play again? 118 years of that rivalry, and now nobody knows, when they might play again. So, real credit to them. And here's a couple other things that's interesting. First of all, this series was dominated by Oklahoma. The overall series was 91-20 to 7 ties.
Yeah.
Oklahoma clearly dominated, right? But what a sweet victory in the last one for Oklahoma State. And they're now 7-2. They've won 5 games in a row, and they're on they control their own destiny to get to Arlington for the Big 12 championship game against probably Texas. Here's who they have left in the regular season. At UCF, who is 4-5. Then Houston, who's 4-5. And then BYU, who's 5-4. It's all 3 of the newcomers in the Big 12. That's who they have left in their path to get to Arlington.
It's doable. I mean, I'm not going to say it's an easy path because any of those teams could certainly, trip them up. But good for them. What a cool opportunity for them. It'd be great to see them play Texas in the Big 12 championship. That'd be great.
Yeah.
So rough one for Oklahoma there. But they'll be back. They got West Virginia this coming week. That won't be an easy game either. West Virginia is a great team, and they're just getting better. So I guess the other big game for this past weekend was Alabama and LSU. A lot of big consequences over there in the SEC West to see what would shake out there with Ole Miss as well. I tended to think LSU might have had a chance to really make an upset here, and it was a great game. I think Bama won by a couple of touchdowns maybe, but it was way closer than that, the entire game. And Jaden Daniels, man, that kid is unbelievable. I mean, he just continues to just show out. I was looking at the SEC stats, SEC rushing stats. Jaden Daniels was like 4th or 5th in the conference in rushing, not to mention leading the conference in passing. And the guy just played phenomenal. I hated that they couldn't pull off a win, but congrats to Bama. Jalen Milroe did equally as good of a job with his legs and his arm. Bama wins at home. Defense showed up there towards the end. Congrats to them. They control their destiny as well. It looks like they'll probably be right for the championship.
Yeah, 985 total yards in that game. So both offenses were going up and down the field, and both quarterbacks, not only were they making plays thrown, they both were leading their teams in rushing. I mean, they both had over 150 yards rushing. Milroe finished with 374 total yards of offense. So probably one of his best games that he's played to the season in a very big game. And, I don't know that Alabama really extended until Jaden Daniels was knocked out of the game. He took a really vicious hit. I don't think it was an unclean hit, but it was a physical hit right as he released the ball in a very vulnerable position and then went into concussion protocol and couldn't finish the game. So that was unfortunate. But Alabama ran the football almost 300 yards rushing. Their defense showed up, in the fourth quarter, and there they are right there. Nick Saban's team is sitting there with one loss to Texas and marching their way towards Atlanta.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine them not making it to Atlanta at this point. I mean, it seems pretty inevitable for them to go and more than likely face Georgia, which will be a fantastic matchup if that happens. That'll be a great game to see. So Bama wins that. So now it is time for, I believe, our tip of the cap for this past week.
All right, fire away, man.
Am I going first? Okay, so hats off to the team of the week for me, which is Clemson. Clemson. taking Notre Dame there at home and just rocking it. And Phil Maffa, I can't even say his name right.
Phil Maffa.
Maffa. Zoo was rushed for 36 times, 186 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's a lot of carries. Clemson defense came up big. Jeremiah Trotter with a big interception for a touchdown, which is cool. But not only that, the dude had 11 tackles and 2 sacks, like 2.5 tackles for loss. Just an incredible game from that defensive player. And So I'm with Dabo. Dabo, what do you have to say?
And I'm really proud of. We ain't had much to go our way this year, but the one thing that has shown up every week is the heart and the fight of Clemson. And I know we're down and everybody's throwing dirt on us, but if Clemson's a stock, you better buy all you freaking can buy right now. Let's go.
If Clemson's a stock, you buy all you freaking can right now. Well, listen, kudos to them for going through a tough season, and everybody's down on them, and they beat Notre Dame at home. What a great win for them. Congrats to Dabo and Clemson.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned Phil Maffa. Will Shipley, their starting tailback, was hurt. So Maffa had to step up, and he stepped up in a big way. So I'm going to go with my player first, and I'll do my team second. My player is Alan Bowman, the quarterback at Oklahoma State. Okay.
Yeah.
He's in his 6th year of college football, kind of like Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr., some of these guys. But Alan Bowman, he started his career at Texas Tech. 2 times during his career at Texas Tech, he was sidelined with a collapsed lung. And then he ended up transferring to Michigan. He was at Michigan for a couple years, but way down the depth chart. Never played at Michigan. Just kept a great attitude, kept learning, kept working. Transferred to Oklahoma State this year. I don't even think he was the starter when the season began, but he moved into the starting lineup and they started playing better. Now they've won 5 games in a row. And in the final Bedlam game, he was 28 of 42 for 334 yards as they beat Oklahoma 27-24. So I'm thrilled for him. Plus, he's got a special place in my heart because his dad, Kirk Bowman, was a teammate of mine at Penn State. And he was one of our tight ends on our national championship team. So really happy for Alan and how his season is going right now.
How about that? Very cool. He probably loved to hear from you. Congratulations. Good to him. Becoming a legend there in Stillwater after this game, probably. Good pick there. Okay, so my tip of the hat for my player this week is the running back from Washington, Dylan Johnson. Lot to be made about Michael Penix Jr., and for good reason. The dude is phenomenal. And I hadn't paid close attention to Washington's running game, honestly, because of Penix. And
it hadn't been much. It hadn't been much up until this week. Really,
been a lot to pay attention to. Yeah. And here comes Dylan against USC. Granted, we all know about USC's defense and their struggles, but still, you're talking about a ranked team, a Pac-12 game on the road. And Dylan Johnson, 26 carries, 256 yards, 4 touchdowns with a 9.8 yards per carry. Dude, almost 10 yards per carry. Just incredible job running the ball. Of course, anytime you run it back does well, you also got to give the credit to the offensive line. So the O-line plus Dylan Johnson is my my players of the week.
All right. Well, I'm going to get to my tip of the cap to my team, but it comes from the game that was played in Chicago between Northwestern and Iowa. They played the game in Wrigley Field, and it was 7-0 for most of the game until a minute 50 left. Northwestern tied it up to make it 7-7, and then Iowa kicked a field goal with 17 seconds left to win the game 10-7. And so my hats off is to the Chicago Cubs. And the reason I say that is because that 10-7 score was the 7th highest scoring game in that building this year. There were 6 Cubs games that were higher scoring than Iowa and Northwestern's 10-7. But I guess in all fairness, I don't think the wind was blowing out in Wrigley on Saturday.
That's so good, Todd Blackledge. I love it. I'm not the only comedian on this podcast, folks. Todd Blackledge is going to start touring with me. That's great. Well, that's so funny. Yeah. I mean, talk about a game that can't get some freaking offense. I mean, that's rough. But the Cubs can outscore Northwestern and Iowa. Phenomenal. Love it. Congrats to the Chicago Cubs, man. Well, good stuff. So, okay, we are in the midst of the Michigan drama still. So here we are, third week of us talking about this. We don't want to beat a dead horse by any means, and but it is relevant to the industry right now. And we've got, this is the AP story coming out here just yesterday. A former employee at a Big Ten football program said Monday it was his job to steal signs, and he was given details from multiple conference schools before his team played Michigan to compile a spreadsheet of play calling signals used by the Wolverines last year. He spoke with the AP on condition of anonymity, fearing the disclosures could impact his coaching career. The employee said he shared with Michigan the documents, which showed the Wolverines' signs and corresponding plays after his school faced the Jim Harbaugh-led program in 2022. The person also passed along screenshots of text message exchanges with staffers from a handful of Big Ten football teams with Michigan, giving the program proof that other conference teams were colluding to steal signs from the Wolverines.
Yeah.
What is happening right now in college?
There's just different. There seems like, and unfortunately now I'm glad now. I mean, Gus and Joel Klatt, they get to deal with the Michigan story the rest of the season. Okay, Noah and Catherine Tappan and I had to do it the very first week the story came out. We're doing Michigan State. Okay, and the allegations came out that Wednesday, and then they had a bye week and more stuff came out. And here we are in Ann Arbor last week. We had to kind of bring everybody up to speed. So I don't know what's happening. These latest things, I don't think, again, and we've talked about this, sign stealing or sign deciphering, as Jim Harbaugh likes to call it, is not illegal, okay? I mean, if you do it in the course of the game, or you do it watching game film, or you do it watching TV copies, and you can compile accurate information, that is within the rules, okay? Now, what this story is about is there some potential collusion among other teams against Michigan. That would go against the sportsmanship policy, I think, that the Big Ten and Tony Petitti, the commissioner, they're using that policy, I think, to look at punishing Michigan. Okay, and I think something is going to happen to Michigan and Jim Harbaugh specifically, because here's the bottom line. If there's credible evidence, and the NCAA is sharing evidence with the Big Ten now, if there is credible evidence that in-person scouting by anybody on the Michigan staff took place, that's a rule broken. That's an NCAA rule that is broken. Okay, and I think everybody's pretty confident that there's video evidence, there's paper trail evidence of tickets, there's all this. And it really doesn't even matter the next part about, whether the information they got was reliable or how much information, because there's no obligation that the Big Ten has to prove that how good the information was. If the rule is broken that there was in-person scouting, that's kind of end of story, and grounds for something to be done. So now this other story that came out today, it throws a different angle on it, and I don't envy Tony Petitti. I like him a lot. We worked together at ABC. We worked together at CBS. And he's been on the job 3 months, and he's got his hands full with this, right? And what he decides to do is going to set a precedent in some way, form, or fashion. He's going to set a precedent with whatever he does here. So it'll be really interesting. It's ironic too that back when the Houston Astros got in trouble for their cheating scandal, Tony Petitti was part of the investigative team working for the Major League Baseball at that time. So he was in the middle of that, and now he's in the middle of something else with Michigan.
Poor guy. Yeah, he was COO or something. I forgot what his role with MLB at that time. And I've talked to Tony as well a couple of times. He used to be part of an organization called the 33rd team with the NFL. He was an executive there, and I did some work with them. But great guy. Don't envy him by any means in what he's dealing with.
Yeah.
Great analysis there from Todd Blackledge. There's one clip I would love to show you really quick of Reese Davis talking with Paul Feinbaum, and just curious your reaction to this. So let's play this real quick on the Feinbaum show.
Some out there are trying to paint those at ESPN as carrying on a narrative against Jim Harbaugh. You have several people from other networks throwing these stones, and not to get you into that food fight unless you'd like to participate, but I feel like your role is critical. Not to speak for everyone that comments on ESPN, but just about ESPN in general and how it covers college football.
Try to be above the fray with that kind of stuff, but when I hear things like that, Paul, I do want to grab a handful of mashed potatoes and sling it in anybody's direction that's willing to take it in the face. It's kind of it's a ridiculous narrative because the people we have covering this story are seasoned journalists whose credibility matters to them. The idea that this is slanted in some way because we're out to get Jim Harbaugh is ridiculous. I'm really fond of Jim. When you get him outside the season, he's a little more difficult in season if you can get to him. But, to have a conversation with him at Big Ten Media Days or any other time, at a basketball game or something, he's a pleasant fellow to be around. Interesting guy, fascinating guy. I think he's got a great sense of humor. Nobody's out to get him. He's responsible for what goes on in his program. It may not be his fault. It is most certainly his responsibility. That's just life. It's always the boss's fault.
So interesting take there from Reese Davis, and well said. I love your reaction to, I guess they're talking about other networks, other people saying, oh, ESPN is on this witch hunt on Jim Harbaugh, and Reese makes a good point about, you're the leader of the program. I mean, it falls to you whether you wanted to or not. That's just kind of the nature of the beast. So yeah, your thoughts on that exchange there?
Yeah, I would tend to agree with Reese. I mean, you've got responsible journalists and people covering the sport that care about their reputation and how they're perceived. And, certainly there's a lot of focus on Michigan right now and a lot of focus on Jim Harbaugh, but that's understandable. Plus, Reese is the host of Game Day, and sitting a couple, right next to him is Desmond Howard, who's a Michigan grad and a very proud Michigan alum. So, I agree with him that they are approaching it the right way. And I also agree with him that, and the NCAA says it this way too, that a head coach is responsible. And, when we met with Jim Harbaugh this past weekend on Friday, he was great with us. He sat and talked to us. He was very forthright, very forthcoming. He did not feel like he was responsible. He does feel like it's his problem and he's got to deal with it. But he felt like he was blindsided. He told us he was blindsided by these allegations and this, the stuff that supposedly Connor Stallions was doing. Yeah. And he didn't feel like that was his responsibility. But, I think the NCAA sees it, and most people would see it as it's under your watch. You're the head man. Yeah. Now, and what the NCAA will say if they investigate and they find out, okay, yes, it's his responsibility, so there's got to be some consequence. But if we believe or come to believe that he did not know, that will affect the severity of whatever discipline would come, as opposed to if they find out that he did know and he lied about it, that will increase the severity of what would come as well.
Well, and is it possible to really find out if he knew or didn't know, or does it come down to just simply his testimony of saying, yeah, I knew or no, I didn't?
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure, they're going to investigate everything. I mean, if they're, and he is, like I said, he's very adamant that he's telling the truth. So he's really going out there on record. I'm sure if he wasn't, there would be some way to track it, whether it's a text message, an email, or a phone, whatever, something, right? So we'll see how it all plays out. I mean, we're sitting here at Tuesday night right now, and I kind of thought something might happen this week based on my conversation with Tony Battisti, and nothing has happened yet, which would lead me to believe that nothing's going to happen before this weekend's game, which is a huge game in State College between Michigan and Penn State.
Yeah, huge game. In fact, let's just go ahead and get to that since you brought it up. Michigan at Penn State. Huge game for both teams. Obviously, Penn State, boy, if they could get this win, that would be big. If I understand it, this is a stripe-out game for Penn State, which would be really cool. I've seen the checker Nealons for Tennessee, and that's pretty cool. I'd love to see the stripe-out there in Michigan, in Penn State live. That would be cool. Michigan's won the last two games. No surprise there, but in the last six matchups, they are 3-3, so pretty even the last 6 years. Currently, I believe Michigan is a 5-point favorite to win this game. 5 points, not a lot. So some people might think I would have almost thought that the spread would have been higher. But what does Penn State have to do to win this football game? How do they make this happen?
Well, a couple things. I mean, first of all, they've got to be better and more efficient offensively. And particularly on third down and throwing the football than they were when they played Ohio State a couple weeks ago in Columbus. Now, it's different playing at home than it is on the road, okay? But they were not good enough on offense to win that game. They played good enough on defense to win the game. But they didn't play good enough on offense. And really, they didn't play good in that game. They weren't great against Indiana. Kind of messed around with the Hoosiers at home the next week. But it looks like they put it together this past week on the road at Maryland. Drew Aller threw for 240 yards and 4 touchdowns. They had one of their Katron Allen ran for almost 100 yards. So they had a good offensive, productive performance, and they're going to need to have a balanced offense, going against a very, very good Michigan defense. And then the other thing, and probably the most important thing, last year when these two teams played in Ann Arbor, Michigan ran for 418 yards against Penn State's defense. Okay, I mean
that's absurd.
Humiliated them. Now after that game, Penn State's defense under Manny Diaz played much better the rest of the year, but that was a horrible moment for the Penn State defense. They had no answers, and so they've got to do a better job against the run this year. Now, Michigan is not as good or as dominant running the football this year as they were last year or even the year before, but they're better throwing it. J.J. McCarthy has elevated his game from last year to this year in a dramatic way, and he is playing at an elite level right now. So, they've got that going for them. Michigan, they're a very confident team. They're a very close team. And so, they're going in there feeling like they're the best team in the country, and they're on a mission. But I think Penn State is good enough to beat them. Penn State was good enough to beat Ohio State talent-wise, but they did not play well on that day. This will be better for them playing at home. So we'll see how it plays out. But I think it's going to be a good football game.
Well, listen, I'm rooting for Penn State, not just because you and I are friends and you're a Penn State alum. Although I certainly have turned my ear to Penn State a little more since you and I have become friends, and I love watching them play. But also, I just love to see things get really shaken up at this time of year. I'd really love to not have hardly any, maybe no undefeated teams. I just like the drama of, okay, Penn State beats Michigan. Oh, but then Michigan beats Ohio State. And just see how it all shakes out. It's very exciting stuff this time of year.
Just so you know, so you can, if that does happen, if all three of those big three finish with, kind of each beat each other and they all are sitting there with one, the tiebreaker would then be based on their records against the Big Ten West and what those teams combined records in the West, which, and I guess at this point, Penn State might have a little bit of an upper hand because they're the only one of Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan that played Iowa. And Iowa's sitting there with the best record in the Big Ten West right now at 7-2. So, but we'll see what happens on Saturday first.
Yeah, it's good. Oh man, it's gonna be fun. I cannot wait for that game. Okay, another game coming up that's gonna be pretty big is Utah at Washington. I still believe Washington is just gonna be tough for anybody to handle going forward. I think they're 10-point favorites. And I did see a quote from Utah's coach, Kyle Whittingham. He said, essentially, Utah has to play their best if they're going to beat Washington. They can't come out and have a good game. They're going to have to play great if they're going to try to beat Washington. And I don't see it happening, but you never know what can happen. But it'll be interesting to see Washington taking on Utah there, as I'm sure Utah's they got nothing to lose. They're going to come in ready to go.
And they're going to be physical. Utah's always going to be a physical team. They're going to try to run the football. They're going to try to play hard-nosed defense. And, the challenge for Washington right now, because they're kind of in rarefied air a little bit, sitting there undefeated, right outside the college football playoff ranking, all of that. You can't take a week off. You cannot have a letdown after a big game and a big win in the Coliseum against USC. You got to come right back out and strap it up against a completely different team. I mean, Utah is a 180-degree different team than USC, the team they just faced. So they've got to regroup and be ready to play a physical kind of a smash mouth kind of game against Utah. And, Washington's schedule, after Utah, they go to Oregon State, who's also a really good team that's 7-2 right now. Then they finish up with the Apple Cup, which is their in-state rival with Washington State, who's kind of gone in the tank here, but it's still a big rivalry game. And then, in all likelihood, a rematch in Las Vegas against Oregon. So that they do not have an easy road from here on out, and it's not going to be easy at all this week against Utah.
No, and it's, again, I love the drama. If Washington wins out, and then they play Oregon in the Pac-12 championship, if Oregon wins out, now if Oregon beats Washington in the Pac-12 championship, now they're both one-loss teams. Right. They've each beat each other once, but one is now a Pac-12 champion and one's not. It just gets dicey there. What do you do? And it's so fun. I mean, honestly, this is a great time of the year. But down in the SEC, you've got this weekend Ole Miss going to Georgia, which I think is going to be a fantastic game. I think Ole Miss is going to put up some points. I really do. I think Georgia, is going to have to match those points, and I imagine Georgia creating some turnovers, and doing some things like that. They haven't played each other since 2012. College game day is going to be there. Georgia's 11.5-point favorites, which I actually think is a little bit, quite a bit. I think it's going to be maybe a closer game than that. Ole Miss is scoring almost 40 points per game, so I'm wondering, can Ole Miss's offense, can they really do enough damage to make it a competitive game at the end? I don't think that in the end that Ole Miss can pull it out, but especially with it being in Athens. But what's your take on this game?
Yeah, I think Georgia will squish them.
Okay.
I don't mean necessarily beat them by 40 points, but Ole Miss can score a lot of points. And Jackson Dart, he can throw, and Quinshawn Jenkins is a great back, right?
Yeah.
But when they played Alabama earlier this year, which is very similar to Georgia, they scored 10 points. Okay. Yeah. And they're going to go on the road to Athens. And this Georgia defense may not be the Georgia defense of 2022 or 2021, but it's still Georgia, right? Yeah. And they still got dudes. And so I think Ole Miss will have a difficult time against them. And I think they'll have a difficult time stopping Georgia on offense as well. So I don't see Georgia, having I think the game they played last week against Missouri will be a much tougher game and a closer game than what they'll have this week with Ole Miss, in my opinion.
Okay. Yeah. Well, Missouri put up a great fight. That was a solid game. And another game coming up this weekend is Tennessee going to Missouri, with potentially some SEC East implications. Again, no one really sees Georgia falling short of being that SEC East champion. I guess this game would be to see who finishes second in the SEC East, Tennessee and Missouri, and see where the bowl placements, winner sixth bowl, things like that. And as a Tennessee fan, I'm a little bit nervous about it. Tennessee is a 1.5-point favorite, so they're thinking it's going to be a close game. I do love Tennessee's rushing attack, third in the country, actually, with 228 yards per game. Jalen Wright, third in the SEC, with 7.5 yards per carry. Just every time he gets the ball, it's like he could go all the way. But then Missouri's got Cody Schrader. The guy's got 919 yards, 10 touchdowns. And then I love Brady Cook and at quarterback, and then their receiver, Luther Burden II.
Yeah.
The guy's got almost.
I think he got banged up a little bit. He got banged up a little bit early in that game, his ankle, and he played in the second half, but I don't think he was 100% or his real self, because he's a difference maker for sure.
Yeah. Well, as a Vols fan, what does Tennessee have to do to win this game? I do remember, Todd, because I'm keeping receipts, you thought they were going to lose at Kentucky, and I did. I remembered that. And I was, it's so funny because Tennessee just got Kentucky's number. I think is one of those games where it's just like, Kentucky fans hate it. They just despise Tennessee. So Tennessee going to Missouri in years past would be like, check it off. Not this year. Missouri's got a great team.
Yeah, they're a good team. I think the way you go in there and win, number one, you take care of the football. You can't have turnovers and have careless turnovers and mistakes.
Yeah.
And you talked about their running game. The best way to take a crowd out on the road and take them out of the game is to be able to run the football effectively. Just kind of pound the ball and it kind of takes the will and the heart out of a defense, and it takes the noise and the energy out of a crowd. So those two things, run the football and take care of the football, are first priorities for Tennessee.
Yeah, good stuff. I was proud to see Joe Milton play really well last couple of weeks as well. So we'll see.
Hey, and while we're talking about Tennessee, I know this is a little bit of a departure, but worthy. How about what Josh Dobbs did this past weekend? Former Tennessee ball. Shows up on Wednesday. He's there for 5 days. He doesn't know the plays. He's learned it on the fly. Doesn't know teammates' names. And he has to go in the game when the starting quarterback is hurt in the first quarter and plays well. And the coach, his head coach, is talking to him in the headsets, telling him what to do, telling him how to call the play and run the play because he's still trying to learn. Now, Josh is a brilliant dude. He's got a brilliant mind. So if anybody could have absorbed that much information in that short time, it's Josh Dobbs. But he went out there, he threw for 158 yards and 2 touchdowns, including, the go-ahead one with about 50 seconds left in the game. He ran for it. He was also their leading rusher in the game. A lot of times just kind of running for his life because he didn't know what the play was. But still, what he did on short notice was remarkable.
It was remarkable. I was so proud to see him doing that. Tennessee fans were, cheering him on and saying, well, we remember those days of Dobbs making something out of nothing. He's a guy that, could just, the play falls apart. Next thing you know, he scored a touchdown. It's like, how did he do that? And little Houdini work there for him. And I saw on Twitter some people talking about, how back when you used to play football in the backyard, you had one guy that maybe would be like the all-time quarterback, for both teams.
Right.
Like Josh Dobbs is like the NFL's all-time quarterback. Like just every week he could just play for a different team. Whoever needs a sub, just put him in. Come in.
Right. Yeah.
Take your team and run with it. But yeah. Thanks for mentioning Dobbs, boy. He's super intelligent. He's an astrophysicist.
Right.
Literally going to be an astronaut when he's done with the NFL. But love how that guy plays. Well, it is Tuesday, November 7th. It is 7:57 p.m., which means the college football rankings have been released by the time you and I are now towards the end of our podcast. So here they are.
No change.
No. Ohio State.
No change to the first 6 anyway. I don't remember what it was after that. I think it's probably, here's one thing that's interesting as we look at this. So this past weekend, the top 5 teams, Ohio State, Georgia, Michigan, Florida State, and Washington, all undefeated, all won again to go to 9-0. This is the first time in the 10-year history of the college football playoff that the top 5 teams have still been undefeated this late in the season. Okay.
Wow.
Now it's not going to stay that way because Ohio State and Michigan play each other, obviously. Washington and Oregon play. So there's big games left. Georgia will have a game probably with Alabama in the SEC championship game, but it's still kind of an interesting little factoid about the college football playoff. The top 5 teams for this year.
So nothing surprises you here necessarily, I guess. Same as last week. For my rankings, which matter to nobody other than me and some of the people that like to argue with me on Facebook, is I had Washington. Good job. Look at Evan Pierce, our producer. I have Washington jumping Florida State. I guess it's, at some point it's just kind of like flip a coin almost, I feel like. But I bumped Washington up there to that number 4 spot. Evan, if you go back to the college football playoff rankings, I'd like to go back there. That's another point of contention would be Alabama fans obviously are always going to complain about something, but they're talking about, they're the best one-loss team. They need to be above Texas and Oregon, which of course they lost.
Well, their one loss was to Texas.
Yeah, so that would be tough to do.
That's a bad argument there.
I agree. And there's the Alabama's beat 3 top 15 teams. I'm like, yeah, but they still lost to Texas, who was ranked above them. So I think, objective as we can be, this looks like a pretty solid list.
Yeah, it does. And the team I think I want to just make mention of, I don't see them, it's going to be very difficult for them to reach the Final Four at any point. But that number 11 team, the Louisville Cardinals with Jeff Brom, they just continue to win. They're 8-1, 5-1 in the ACC. There is no more divisions in the ACC, so they don't play Florida State in the regular season, but they potentially would play them in the ACC championship game here in Charlotte, where I live. And Jeff Brom they got a good thing going. They're good on offense and defense. They beat Virginia Tech this past weekend 34-3, and Virginia Tech had been playing good the last 3 weeks. So don't sleep on the Louisville Cardinal. I think everybody is just kind of, writing in Florida State as the ACC champ. But Louisville might have something to say about that.
They do. They already took out Notre Dame, and now other people are taking out Notre Dame as well, but still a good win. Here's a scenario. Ole Miss beats Georgia. What happens there, do you think?
Well, if Ole Miss beats Georgia, Ole Miss still lost to Alabama, so they could finish with the same record in the SEC, but Alabama had won the head-to-head, so Alabama would still go to Atlanta.
Above them.
Yeah, above them.
Yes, and like we talked about Penn State and Michigan here. It's a great matchup. It's going to lead. And, this is getting towards the bottom of it, but Tulane at number 23. I have not ranked Tulane in my 25 yet so far. I don't know why. I just am not sold on Tulane in that group of 5. I feel like, I love Liberty and JMU getting up in there, but I don't know. Can you sell me on Tulane? Do you have anything you can say that would cause me to want to rank Tulane in my top 25?
Well, this is the second year in a row that they've been rank-worthy team. Okay, last year they did go to one of those New Year's Six bowls, and they won. They beat
USC,
Cotton Bowl or whatever bowl game they played at. Beat them. And so, they're a legit team. They're a legit team, and they play in a good conference. The American Athletic Conference is a pretty good football league.
Sure.
They're, them and SMU and Memphis are probably the top 3 teams in that league. But Tulane is they're a solid football program.
Well, maybe I'll need to jump in there.
And then your boys, Arizona and Jed Fish. They've won 3 games in a row against ranked opponents now. They're playing as well as anybody right now, and I think they go play Colorado this week. So could be another tough day for Dion and the Buffaloes.
They are on a tear. Arizona is. I hope they keep going. I put a question out on Twitter, and we don't have this to bring up, which is okay, but asking people who's the best 3-loss team in college football, and I believe the options were LSU, Notre Dame, Arizona, and Kansas State. If you had to pick, who would you say is the best of those 4? I'll tell you, I would say LSU at this point still. But any thoughts?
I love their offense. I love Jaden Daniels, but their defense has been so un-LSU like this year. They've given up a lot of points and yards to a lot of people. So it's hard to say if they played any of those other teams who would win. Probably would be LSU, but I would also be close to picking Kansas State because they're a hard-nosed team and well-coached team and play well on both sides of the ball.
Love it. Well, I'm having a blast here, but we are into our last segment here on the Man in Black podcast. My favorite segment called Ask Todd.
It's time to Ask Todd.
Okay, so we put out some questions on Twitter this week, and the first one is from Jeff Attanella, who runs Smack Apparel, great t-shirt company, by the way. You got to check them out, smackapparel.com. Do you, Todd, think Penn State will ever get over the hump, whatever that might mean? And if so, what's it going to take?
Yeah. The hump is, beating Ohio State and or Michigan. Those are the 2 teams ahead of them, and it's been that way, for a while now. And so they've had a little more success against Michigan in the last several years than they have against Ohio State. They've had really bad luck against Ohio State. So, that was the question this year. Are they good enough to beat one or both of those teams? Defensively, yes. Offensively, they were not when they played in Columbus. So they get their next opportunity on Saturday. And for them to get over the hump, which means get back to Indianapolis to play in a Big Ten championship game and potentially have a chance for making it into the college football playoff. That's what getting over the hump is. And, they did not get it done in Columbus. they got a chance to get it done here in State College this weekend.
Well, I, for one, have been, again, like I said, all for Penn State and feeling like this is a year, maybe the year that they could get over that hump because of the team they have, the experience they've got now. James Franklin in his, I don't know what it's the 7th or 8th year. I don't even know how long he's been there, but I mean, it's,
10th.
It's the 10th year, really. Wow.
Yeah.
But Michigan, like being this good, it's like, can the guy get a break? Can Penn State have like a big year when maybe one of those teams doesn't have a big year? But so far, not right now. But good analysis there. I hope
Drew Aller's going to have to play well, the quarterback. This is his first year as a starter. He's been up and down, did not play well at all against Ohio State, a great Ohio State defense. Played really well last week on the road against Maryland, but Michigan's defense will be similar to what he faced with Ohio State. And he's got to play well. He's got to throw the ball well. I mean, just on paper going into that game, Michigan has the edge at quarterback because J.J. McCarthy is a proven commodity and he has played at an elite level all season.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good stuff. Well, second question is still, we're in the Penn State world. Todd, as a Penn State athlete and alum, how do you feel about Penn State joining the Big Ten decades later?
I'm cool with it now. I did not like it originally. When they first made the decision to go, I wasn't a big fan. And the two reasons I wasn't a big fan, first of all, we had rivalry games. Like our game against Pitt every year on the Friday after Thanksgiving was a great rivalry game, and that was going to go away. We played West Virginia every year. It was a really good rivalry. We played Syracuse, teams, Eastern teams that, Penn State had always played, and all of a sudden we weren't going to have that. Plus, I enjoyed our independent status because we got to play Alabama. We got to play Missouri and Nebraska and Notre Dame and some of these teams. So I wasn't a huge fan at the time. But now, especially with everybody kind of realigning and getting in conferences, Penn State fits the Big Ten, right? They fit it from a football standpoint. They fit it from the other sports. It was a really good move for all the other sports. I think football could have made it independently, similar to what Notre Dame is doing, but it's been great for the other sports. And just as a university and what Penn State stands for academically and as a research institution, and it fits the Big Ten. So, at this point now, even though I didn't play in the Big Ten, I think it's been a good move for Penn State.
Yeah, for sure. But, it is interesting to see, the way the conference alignment's happening now. I could go on the soapbox about Stanford, who literally can look out their campus and see the Pacific Coast coming over and playing on the Atlantic Coast Conference. Makes absolutely no sense at all whatsoever. And I could go on and on about that, but good question there from R. Wilson. Our third question here is from another Todd Sheffer. Will Penn State's O-line be able to perform better against Michigan than they did against Ohio State? They better, I guess, would be the answer.
Yeah, it is the answer. I mean, that's and you know what? When these teams play, when teams like this play, I don't care about your skilled people. I mean, it doesn't matter if you've got Drew Aller and Keandre Lambert-Smith and J.J. McCarthy and, Blake Corum and, Marvin Harrison Jr. for Ohio State and Travion Henderson. Those are all great players, right? And they're going to make plays. But games like this, championship level games, Ohio State, Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan, Penn State, they're won or lost in the trenches. They're won or lost by who controls the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
And honestly, the reason Michigan beat Ohio State the last 2 years is because they were the more physical team in the trenches. They were better on the offense and defensive lines the last 2 years than Ohio State was. And when Ohio State played Penn State a couple weeks ago, they were better at the line of scrimmage than Penn State was on both sides. So yeah, that if they want to have a chance to win, they're going to have to perform at a much higher level because Michigan's defense is every bit as good as Ohio State's, and they're deeper than Ohio State's. Michigan rotates 9 guys on their defensive line on a regular basis. When they played Ohio State, those 2 starting defensive ends, Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau, they played about 65 snaps of the game. Nobody on the Michigan defensive line has played more than 35 snaps a game. They have so much depth, and they're interchangeable, and they rotate them all. They have 4 edge rushers, rotate interchangeably. They got 5 interior defensive linemen, rotate interchangeably. They keep them fresh for the whole game, and when they're out there, I mean, they are going, 100 miles an hour. So the Penn State offensive line will have a real challenge in front of them on Saturday.
I mean, that is a significant challenge. You never have a point when their defensive line is tired.
Right.
They're always
they play 3 or 4 plays at a time, and then they rotate. And if you watch the game Saturday, it almost will look like a hockey line shift because they'll sub out 4 guys at a time. I mean, and there'll be 4 new guys that'll run on after like 3 or 4 plays. It's a crazy thing.
The high school I went to, Science Hill High School in Johnson City, Tennessee, home of Steve Spurrier as well. But our basketball team was that's what we were known for. We won 3 state championships at 5A in like 5 years. And our coach, George Pitts, that's what he did. I mean, there was never the same 5 on the floor for longer than a few minutes, and he was just in and out. And we had such depth. He could do that, and they wore teams down. They pressed the whole game.
Right.
I mean, it was exhausting for the other team, and just wore them out. And so, yeah, that's a strategy that works. And I guess similar, in offense, if you're running this fast-paced offense that Josh Heupel and others are running, that yes, that's the idea. You wear out the defense. So they don't have time to regroup. Right. But boy, it's going to be fun to see this game. I can't wait to see.
It will be.
See what happens. Our last question for Ask Todd, going back to Josh Dobbs and that remarkable performance in Sunday's win, what quarterback in all the games you've ever called has impressed you the most in a similar way, right? So a backup coming in or a freshman or a performance against an incredible defense. You can think of a similar Josh Dobbs story in all your years of all your many years calling football.
Yeah. So I saw this question earlier, and I sat and thought about it for a while because I have seen a lot of games, and there's one game that stood out to me, and it was after the 2013 season. It was the Sugar Bowl, January 3rd, 2014, and Oklahoma was playing Alabama. You got your Sooner stuff on. And Oklahoma started a freshman quarterback by the name of Trevor Knight in the game. And Trevor Knight and A.J. McCarron was the quarterback for Alabama, had a great season. And Trevor Knight, before that game, had only thrown 47 passes. And 47 completions. He was completing like 52% of his passes. And all he did against Alabama's defense that night, just an incredible performance. He was 32 of 44, 348 yards, and 4 touchdowns. And Oklahoma upset Alabama 45-31. Bob Stoops was a coach at Oklahoma at that time. And it was really a fun game to do. But Trevor Knight just kind of came from out of nowhere. Now, he started the game, but nobody really knew that he was going to start. And he made the most of his opportunity.
Man, Trevor Knight, a name I haven't heard in a while. But I do remember that game now that you mention it. Good for him. You mentioned Bob Stoops, and not to go back to a tip of the cap, but I've been impressed with Drake Stoops, wide receiver for Oklahoma.
He's a ball player.
He's a ball player, man. He's a dog. Gets out there and gets it done. He's a walk-on, earned a scholarship, and he's in his 5th or 6th year, and he's living the dream, man. Good for him.
Yeah. So hey, let me one last thing because I know our vast viewing audience, loves Taste of the Town and loves the food stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I've been trying to pay attention of good places that I go to eat. So when I was in Ann Arbor, I went and revisited a place that I had done a Taste of the Town at. So it's called Frita Batidos. It's right downtown in Ann Arbor. That's my partner, Noah Eagle, trying to read the menu, trying to figure out what he wants to get as we're getting ready to walk in. So this meal, a frita, is like a Cuban sandwich or a Cuban burger that's made with either beef or chorizo. And then you have the fries right on top of it, okay? And a batito, which I don't have in the picture, that's like a Cuban milkshake. So this restaurant is like Cuban street food. And you see the egg. Well, under the egg is a double patty of chorizo with jalapenos and guacamole and like a tropical slaw, the French fries. It's an incredible sandwich. I did a Taste of Town there a few years ago and wanted to go back and take Noah to it, and he was a big fan. So that's the that and the way I got it, where you get the egg and just like everything, that's kind of a kitchen sink type deal. They call that loco. If you order the Frita and you say I'll take it loco, that means throw all that stuff on there. So that is a double chorizo Frita loco.
That looks good. I could dig into that right now. Is that, and it's not a sandwich, right? Is it or do you,
no, it is.
It is
a sandwich, but
okay, I see the bread.
It'd be hard to pick it up and eat it. So
Okay.
I went in with a fork and knife. Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah, that's a sandwich is good. But see, when you can't even cut it up to eat it, you got to go in with the fork and the knife. Man, that's good. That looks great. Wow. Well, Todd, it's been a great episode here. We're here at our 60-minute mark, and it's all right.
We got so many good things to talk about, right? I know.
So good. So, where are you at this weekend coming up?
I'm in Columbus, so I'll see Ohio State and Michigan State. It's a night game, so I'll get to sit in my hotel and watch Penn State and Michigan for pretty much the whole game before I have to go to the stadium to do my game. So it'll be a very fun Saturday for me to do that.
It's gonna be a good time. I'll be in Oklahoma, and thanks to everyone for watching, listening to the Man in Black podcast, episode 7. We are on our way to hopefully many more episodes, and make sure you're subscribing and following us so we can keep bringing some good expert analysis from Todd Blackledge, and then I'm just kind of sitting here, just talking about whatever. So anyways, Todd, have a great week. Thank you all for watching. See you next week.
All right, man. See ya.